There are secrets buried deep in the soil of the countryside. Stories no one dares to tell out loud. But today, I will. My name is Eloise Margaret Brown, and when I was just a girl, my stepfather and his 3 brothers turned my childhood into a nightmare. They abused me, over and over, and when they thought I'd had enough, they planned to kill me. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I did something no one saw coming. I poisoned them, one by one, and I never looked back. This isn't a tale for the faint-hearted. This is the truth my mother never saw. And now, it's time the world hears it. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and comment where you're watching from. Now grab a seat, because this story will leave you mouth open forever. My name is Eloise Margaret Brown, and this is not a story I tell for pity. I tell it because silence nearly buried me alive. I was born in 1945, in a small house tucked between cotton fields and dirt roads in southern Alabama. Folks called it the quiet side of the state. But if you listened close enough, the silence could scream. My real father died when I was just a baby, fell off a broken ladder during harvest season, and never got back up. Mama cried for weeks, then put his memory in a box and started moving like the world hadn't stopped turning. She was a traveling seamstress, at least. That's what she told people. She was always on a train, or a bus, or hitching rides to sell clothes she stitched by hand. She was beautiful, light-skinned, sharp cheekbones, a voice like melting sugar, but she had a restlessness in her bones. Home was never enough. I loved her. God knows I did. But she was the kind of mother who only stayed long enough to kiss your forehead, drop a bag of flour on the kitchen table, and then vanish again before the biscuits even cooled. Most times, I'd wake up and find her gone without a goodbye. A handwritten note folded on the kitchen chair. So it was just me, the wind, and the walls. I learned to cook early, braid my own hair, and sew the holes in my socks. I'd sit on the front porch with our hound dog and count the cars that never stopped on our road. My life was quiet, until Ernest came. Mama brought him home after one of her longer trips. She wore red lipstick that day and smelled like jasmine. She smiled too wide, walked too fast. "This is Ernest," she said, ruffling my hair. "My husband now." He was a tall man with long arms and coal-colored eyes. He didn't smile much, but when he did, his teeth were yellow like old pages. Something about him made the air go heavy, and he didn't come alone. Behind him were 3 men, Joe, Harold, and Clay, his brothers. They smelled like oil, beer, and bad intentions. Mama didn't ask if I was okay with it. She just said, "They'll be staying with us a while. Don't be rude." The house went from quiet to crowded overnight. The living room turned into a card table. My bedroom door stopped locking. The fridge emptied faster. Mama, as always, was packing to leave again. "I'll only be gone a few days," she said, tucking a hairpin into her bun. "Be good for Ernest. Don't cause trouble." She kissed my cheek, grabbed her suitcase, and just like that, she was gone again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked differently. The laughter from the living room wasn't the kind that made you smile, it was the kind that made your skin crawl. I curled up under my blanket and tried to disappear. It was the first night I felt something dark shifting in the air. I didn't know then what those men were capable of. I didn't know they were already looking at me like I was prey, but I remember thinking, Mama left me with strangers, and I don't think they're good men. I was only 10 years old, too young to understand evil, but old enough to feel it settling into our walls like mold. And I was right, because what they did next over the weeks and months that followed would burn a hole in my soul that even time couldn't heal. The first time it happened, it was Harold. He was the loudest of the brothers, always laughing too hard, drinking too much, slamming things when he didn't get his way. His eyes were small, mean, and always following me like a dog that hadn't been fed. He smelled like sweat and corn liquor, and I hated being in the same room with him. It was late one night. The power had flickered off in a thunderstorm. Mama had been gone for 3 days. I was in my room with a candle burning low, trying to read one of her old books to keep my mind still. That's when I heard the floorboards creak outside my door. I remember thinking it was the wind until I saw the knob turn. Slow. Quiet. Then the door opened. "Eloise," Harold whispered, slurring. "You still up, baby girl?" My body froze. "I just wanted to check on you," he said, stepping inside without permission. "Don't be scared. I ain't gonna hurt you." But he did. And when it was over, he told me not to cry, said I'd ruin Mama's marriage, told me it was our secret. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stared at the ceiling and felt my heart get quieter. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the other men. Harold poured himself coffee like nothing had happened. Ernest grunted. Joe lit a cigarette. Nobody looked at me. That was when I realized they all knew, and they were all waiting their turn. In the days that followed, it became routine. A look, a whisper, a door left open. Joe was next, then Clay, then back to Harold again. Each time they warned me. Each time, I tried to disappear further into myself. I tried telling my mother. She came home one Sunday morning, like a gust of perfume in rushing heels, hugging me with one arm while checking her purse with the other. I pulled her into my room, my hands shaking. "Mama, I need to tell you something," I said. She sighed. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted." "No," I whispered. They're doing things to me. Ernest and his brothers." She froze. For a moment, I thought she heard me. I really did. But then she rolled her eyes. "Don't start, Eloise. You always had a wild imagination." "I'm not lying," I said, desperate. "Please." She put a finger to my lips. "Don't talk like that. You'll mess up everything we've worked for. These men are providing for us. You think I like traveling town to town just to keep food in your mouth?" I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She left the next morning. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look me in the eye. After that, I stopped asking for help. The locks on my door disappeared. My voice shrank. The girl I had been a child who used to sing to the chickens, who played in the sun with bare feet, she started to vanish. Every night I stared at the ceiling, not praying, not dreaming, just surviving, until one night, I overheard something. A conversation that chilled my blood more than anything those men had ever done to me. A plan. A promesa. And I knew if I didn't do something, if I didn't act first, I was going to die in that house. It was past midnight, and the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after whiskey bottles are drained and men fall into restless, guilty sleep. I couldn't sleep that night. My chest felt tight. My bones ached like they were warning me. Something was wrong. I crept out of bed barefoot, the wooden floor cold beneath me. I tiptoed to the edge of the hallway, pressing myself against the wall. From there, I could see the warm orange glow of the oil lamp flickering from the kitchen. Voices, low and thick with liquor. They didn't know I was awake. They never imagined I'd be listening. I crouched near the staircase and leaned in, my heart pounding against my ribs. "She's getting too old," Harold mumbled. "She stares too much. She's thinking." Joe snorted. "Maybe she's planning to run off. Tell somebody." Ernest slammed something, maybe a glass, maybe his fist. "Ain't no one gonna believe her. She's just a little black girl with a wild mouth. Same as her mother was." Clay chuckled. "Still, loosens cause problems." Then there was a pause, a silence that screamed louder than words. And then I heard it. "We take her to the river one night. Ernest said slowly. Say she drowned. The current'll carry her body out to the bay. Nobody'll ever find her. My throat closed. They were planning to kill me. Harold burped. When? Soon, Joe said. Before she grows up and starts getting brave. Clay raised his voice just enough to cut through the room. You ask me, we should have done it after the first time she cried. And then they all laughed. Not loud laughter, cold, cruel, dead laughter. I held my breath, my fingers digging into the wall, the old wallpaper peeling beneath my nails. In that moment, the truth settled deep inside me. I was never going to be rescued. Not by my mother, not by a neighbor, not by anyone. Those men saw me as nothing. A mouth to silence, a body to bury. So I did what any scared little girl would do. I ran. Not out of the house, I had nowhere to go. I ran to the barn, past the chickens, past the rusted wheelbarrow, and curled myself up in the hay, trembling like a leaf in the wind. That night I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I realized something that scared me even more than dying. I didn't want to be a victim. I wanted to live. And if no one was coming to save me, then I would save myself. No matter what it took, even if it meant doing the unthinkable, even if it meant becoming something I never thought I could be. I didn't sleep for days after hearing their plan. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps coming for me. Every night, I hid in the barn with my eyes wide open until the roosters crowed. But fear can only hold you hostage for so long. Eventually, something changes. Something shifts. And for me, it happened in the attic. It was a hot afternoon. The men were out drinking at the nearby bar. Mama hadn't written in weeks. I climbed into the attic, looking for anything that could take my mind off the ticking clock in my head. That's when I found it. An old wooden chest, dusty and forgotten in the far corner. It belonged to my real father. My heart trembled as I opened it. Inside were things I hadn't seen since I was small, his army medals, a photograph of him holding me as a baby, and something else. A leather-bound book, worn and yellowed, titled Herbs of the South, for healing and survival. It wasn't just a book, it was a manual for life and death. Pages filled with roots and plants, drawings of leaves, mixtures for stomach pain, fevers, and poisons. My fingers paused on one page. Nightshade. Beautiful. Deadly. Causes vomiting, seizures, and death in high doses. Another one. Hemlock. Once used in executions. Tasteless. Fatal in hours. And there were more wild mushrooms, foxglove, bitter almonds. At first I was scared just holding it. But then I remembered Ernest's voice. Take her to the river. That book became my secret weapon. From that day on, I spent my time in the overgrown garden behind the house, the one Mama had planted before she gave up trying to be a mother. The men never paid attention to it. Weeds had taken over. But deep beneath, some of the herbs still lived. I began to learn. Mint for stomach aches. Lavender for sleep. Wild onions to keep the mosquitoes away. And others for something far darker. I tested small bits on rats I found in the barn. At first, nothing happened. Then one died. 2. Then 3. I kept a notebook of my own, hidden beneath the floorboard under my bed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was war. A war no one knew I was fighting. At night, while the men drank and laughed downstairs, I listened. I studied their routines. I watched who poured their own drinks and who let someone else do it. I saw which brother liked stew, which one favored tea. I memorized how long it took each one to fall asleep after eating. They never noticed how quiet I had become. How still. I was just the invisible girl again, the one nobody saw, the one nobody feared. And that was their mistake, because while they were laughing, I was planning. While they were plotting my death, I was preparing theirs. The old me, the girl who cried in the hay, who begged her mama to listen. She was fading. In her place was someone colder, someone with purpose, someone dangerous. I knew I had one chance to get it right, one slip, and I'd be the one buried in the river. But if I did it right, they'd never hurt me or anyone else ever again. Harold was the first. It had to be him. He was the one who started it all, the first to enter my room. The first to take from me what he never had a right to. He was always laughing, slapping his belly like a pig, bragging about how nothing in this world scared him. But he had no idea how much a quiet girl could hold. I spent days watching him. He always poured himself a glass of whiskey after supper. Always drank it from the same chipped green cup. Always left it on the table while he went to the outhouse. That was when I made my decision. The night I slipped the poison in. The air was still, thick with summer heat. The men were all outside, playing cards and slapping dominoes. I'd crushed just enough of the dried nightshade berries to slip into his drink. Not enough to smell, but more than enough to kill. My hands were shaking, but my heart was calm. I'd already decided. I waited until Harold stood up and said, "Be right back. Gotta drain the pipes." The other men laughed, and he stumbled away, whistling like he had the world in his palm. That was my moment. I slipped into the kitchen like a shadow, pulled the tiny paper packet from my apron, and emptied it into the green cup. It dissolved instantly. By the time Harold returned, the cup was where he left it, sitting on the wooden table under the dim bulb, waiting for him like it always did. He didn't even look at me when he drank it. Didn't know the girl he used to slap, spit at, and break was the same one standing across the room, watching his final moments tick down like a clock. At first, he was fine. Then his face turned pale. He coughed once, twice. Then he grabbed his stomach. "Something ain't right," he muttered, standing up. "I feel..." It didn't finish. He collapsed onto the floor, his limbs jerking like a dying fish. The other men jumped up, yelling, panicking. Ernest knelt beside him, slapping his face, screaming his name. I stood at the kitchen door, pretending to be afraid, pretending I didn't know. They called the town doctor, who arrived 15 minutes too late. He checked Harold's pulse, looked him over, and said the same thing they always do when they don't want to ask questions. "Heart failure." He shrugged. Could have been the heat. Could have been his drinking. The brothers nodded. They were sad, yes, but not suspicious. Men like them never imagine someone they've hurt has the power to strike back. That night, they buried Harold behind the barn with a wooden cross and half a bottle of whiskey beside his grave. Clay cried. Joe drank more. Ernest sat quiet, staring at the floor like the silence was suddenly too loud. I watched them all, and I realized something. They weren't invincible. They could bleed. They could fall. They just didn't know it yet. But they would, because Harold was only the beginning, and I was just getting started. After Harold died, the house got quieter. But it wasn't peace, it was fear. Joe drank more. Clay barely spoke. And Ernest? He watched me. He didn't say much, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he knew something had changed, even if he couldn't name it. But they still didn't suspect me. To them, I was just a silent, broken little girl. What harm could I possibly do? That was their mistake. Clay was next. He wasn't as cruel as Harold. Not at first. He didn't talk much, but his silence wasn't kind. He was cold, calculated. He never hit me in front of the others. But when we were alone, he'd grab my arm too tight, whisper things in my ear that made my skin crawl. I watched his habits like a hawk. Clay had a sweet tooth. He loved peach jam. Mama's homemade recipe still sat on the pantry shelf in a row of dusty jars. Every morning he'd slap it on biscuits and eat 2 or 3 before the sun rose. So I waited until the kitchen was empty. I took 1 jar, emptied it halfway, and mixed in crushed foxglove petals from the garden. I'd read about it in my father's book, beautiful to look at, but deadly to swallow, especially when cooked into something warm and sweet. I sealed the jar back, wiped the outside clean, and placed it carefully at the front of the pantry. The next morning, Clay ate like he always did, greedy and fast. I watched from the hallway, pretending to sweep, my eyes on the crumbs falling from his mouth. He smacked his lips, said nothing, and went about his day. For hours, nothing happened. I started to think I hadn't used enough. Then, while chopping wood by the barn, he collapsed. It wasn't sudden like Harold. It was slow. He dropped to his knees, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with panic. "Something's wrong," he wheezed. "Can't breathe." Joe found him, screamed for Ernest. I stayed back, pretending to be too afraid to come closer. Clay died, gasping for air. Dirt on his face, eyes staring at the sky like he was looking for a way out. This time, things were different. Joe didn't cry. He cursed. He looked at the empty biscuit plate, then at me, standing in the doorway. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Later that night, I overheard him whispering to Ernest, "2 of us gone. Just like that. You think it's bad luck?" Ernest grunted. "They drank too much. Ate too much. What are you trying to say?" Joe leaned in closer. "I'm saying, it's too clean, too quiet. That girl, she's always watching." I didn't flinch. I didn't run. Let them suspect. Let them shake. Because it was already too late. Joe stayed up that night with a shotgun by his side. He paced the house, muttering to himself, glancing over his shoulder every few minutes like death might tap him on the back. He was right. Death was coming. And this time, it wouldn't come in the form of jam or stew. It would come in a bottle. 'Cause Joe loved his wine, and I had one last plant to use hemlock. Joe didn't sleep much after Clay died. He sat in the living room with the shotgun across his lap, rocking back and forth in their father's old chair, eyes bloodshot, lips dry. He stopped going to town, stopped bathing. He barely ate, but he still drank. That was his weakness. Every night, he poured himself a glass of Mama's blackberry wine, the kind she used to make in big clay jugs before she stopped caring about anything. He said it helped him sleep, said it dulled the guilt he never admitted he had. That's where I found my next opening. The hemlock plants were in the garden, tall and green, almost pretty if you didn't know what they were. My real father's old field guide warned, just a small dose could shut down the body, the muscles, the breath. It was called the gentle killer. That was perfect for Joe. He always thought dying would be loud bullets, knives, a fire. But no, his end would be slow, quiet, like the breath leaving a child's lungs in the dark. I crushed the leaves and mixed them into his wine bottle just before sunset. He'd already opened it the night before. He wouldn't notice the bitterness, not after the way he drank. That night the house was silent. Even the crickets outside went still. Joe poured his glass like always, hands shaking, staring at the fire like it might speak to him. I sat in the corner of the room, pretending to read, watching from behind the pages. He took one sip, then another. He didn't say a word. 10 minutes passed, then 15. And then he dropped the glass. It shattered against the floorboards, dark red liquid spreading like blood across the wood. Joe clutched his throat, gasping. I can't, he choked. Ernest rushed in from the back room. "Joe? What's wrong?" Joe fell to the floor, his arms twitching. I stood up, wide-eyed, pretending to panic. "Ernest, what's happening to him?" Ernest turned pale. "Get water! Call for Doc, go!" But it was too late. Joe's eyes rolled back. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just silence, cold and final. The room was still. Ernest dropped to his knees beside him, slapped his cheeks, screamed his name, but Joe was already gone. 2 brothers in a week, 3 in a month. Now only one was left. Ernest. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just stood up, turned to me slowly, and stared, and I stared back. We both knew something had shifted. Something invisible had shattered between us. He didn't say anything, but I could see it in his face. He finally knew. That night, I locked my door. Ernest didn't sleep. He paced the hallway. I heard his boots creaking over the wooden floor again and again, back and forth, like a predator waiting for a signal to strike. The air in the house turned thick. Mama was still gone. Somewhere far. Too busy to care. And me? I lay in my bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. 3 down. 1 more to go. But Ernest wouldn't go easy. He was the one who watched the most. The one who planned ahead. The one who taught the others how to hurt without leaving marks. But this time I wasn't scared of him, because I had become something worse than anything he'd ever imagined. And he knew it. The house had gone cold, not from the weather, but from something deeper, like the walls themselves had started to rot from the inside. It smelled like wood smoke and death. And Ernest was no longer pretending. He stopped speaking altogether. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't touch me. He just watched. He moved like a shadow. Silent, slow, steady. Every time I entered a room, I'd find him already there or just leaving. I'd hear footsteps behind me, even when I knew I was alone. At night, I'd see the doorknob to my room twitch ever so slightly, like someone was testing it. He knew, and he was waiting for me to slip. I couldn't let that happen. So, I made a plan, but Ernest beat me to it. One morning, I woke to find a note tucked beneath my door. Just 3 words, written in his jagged, dirt-stained handwriting. Let's have dinner. I knew what it meant. No one cooked anymore since Mama left. We lived off bread, dried meat, and things I boiled when I had the strength. But now he wanted dinner. A final meal. One of us would not survive the night. I accepted, because I'd already prepared the final trick. You see, I had saved the most poisonous plant for last. Nightshade. Beautiful purple flowers. Berries like tiny black grapes. It grew wild by the fence where no one looked. I'd been drying the leaves for weeks, hiding them between pages of my old spelling books. I set the table. 2 plates. 2 glasses. I made stew rabbit and potatoes and served wine I didn't touch. I crushed the dried nightshade into Ernest's bowl, then stirred it in like it was just seasoning. He walked in wearing his Sunday shirt. No tie. Boots dusty. Hair slicked back with oil. We sat across from each other like strangers. He didn't eat at first. He stared at me. His eyes were sharp and dark, like 2 rusted nails pushed deep into a plank of wood. You did it, didn't you? He finally said, voice low. I didn't answer. He gave a bitter smile. Harold, Clay, Joe, all gone, and you're still here. I looked at him, calm as a pond before a storm. I survived. He lifted his spoon slowly. Not for long. He took a bite, chewed, swallowed, then reached into his shirt pocket and tossed something on the table. My heart stopped. It was one of the dried nightshade leaves. He hadn't eaten it. He'd switched the bowls. I stared down at my own stew still untouched. Ernest leaned in. You think you're smart, but I taught the others how to hide bruises. I taught them how to make a scream sound like silence. I made this house what it is. I met his gaze and whispered, and I'll be the one to burn it to the ground. His smile cracked. I switched your bowl, girl. You're done. I pushed my plate forward with 1 finger. I didn't poison the stew. He froze. What? I poisoned the wine. His face changed. He looked at the half-empty glass in front of him. His hands began to shake. I stood up slowly. You taught them how to hurt people, but I learned something better. How to end it. He tried to stand. Staggered. His mouth opened, but no words came, only blood. Mama's car rolled up the driveway like a ghost returning from a long-forgotten grave. The wheels stirred dust on the dry path, and for a moment, I just stood there on the porch barefoot, still in the same faded dress I wore when Ernest died. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. I just watched her step out of the car, like she always did, rushing, distracted, weighed down with shopping bags and city noise. "Baby girl," she called out. "I brought you something sweet maple candy from the city." Her voice was warm, too warm, like she didn't know that this house had turned into a graveyard. She looked around. "Where's Ernest? And the boys?" I didn't answer. Her smile faltered. "Are they out back?" I shook my head, slow and stiff. "They're gone, Mama." "Gone where?" "They're dead." She laughed softly, confused. "What?" "Gone," I repeated. "All of them. Clay, Harold, Joe, Ernest." Her bags dropped with a thud. What do you mean they're dead?" I looked her in the eye, let my lips tremble, let the fear she never saw before finally show. "They got sick," I whispered, one by one. Fever, shaking, bleeding. "It happened so fast, Mama. I was so scared." Her hand covered her mouth. "All 4 of them? Are you hurt? Did they touch you again?" I turned my face away and let the tears fall silent. Slow, perfect. She rushed to me like she should have done years ago, her arms wrapped around me, and I let my body go limp against hers. I didn't fight it. I just buried my face in her shoulder and let her think I was broken, innocent, lucky to be alive. "My God, my poor baby," she cried. "What happened here? What have they done?" I didn't say the words. I didn't need to. Let her mind fill in the blanks. Let her imagination torture her more than the truth ever could. She rocked me gently, just like she used to when I scraped my knee as a little girl. "I should have never left you with them," she wept. "I should have known better." "But you didn't," I whispered. And that silence between us said everything. She sat with me on the porch until the sun began to set. Her hands never left mine. And for the first time in a long time, she saw me not as a child, not as someone who needed to be fixed or quieted, but as someone who had lived through something unspeakable. "What do we do now?" she asked. "You stay," I said. "Just for a while." "I will," she promised. "I'll take care of everything." She didn't ask where the bodies were. She didn't ask why no one came to help. Some part of her didn't want to know. Some part of her knew enough. That night, Mama cooked for the first time in months. She made cornbread and soup, humming like the world hadn't just fallen apart. I sat at the table, nodding, smiling faintly, playing the part she needed me to play. She never saw the way I looked at the kitchen shelf, at the last jar of peach jam, untouched. Save for someone else. But no more death would come from it, not tonight. Because the story I was telling wasn't just for Mama, it was for the world. And some truths? They're too dark for the light. You're probably wondering how I lived with it, how I sat through the years, watching time pass like a slow train, carrying faces and names that would never know my truth. You're wondering if I ever told my Mama what really happened in that house. No, killed. He didn't. I let her believe what she needed to believe. I let the world see a poor little girl who lost everything, who buried her pain and rose from the ashes. And maybe that's true. But this is the first time I'm speaking it out loud. Because you need to know. Because there are girls out there right now who are being left behind in houses that look warm from the outside but burn cold on the inside. And if nobody speaks for them, their pain just turns to silence. I grew up in that silence. My Mama never looked close enough to see the bruises. She never stayed long enough to notice the way I flinched when someone called my name. She was chasing dreams while I was living a nightmare. But now I sit here on this porch an old woman, with shaky hands and bones that ache when it rains. And I think about those men. I think about how they laughed when I cried, how they hurt me, and thought no one would ever stand up to them, and how I stood anyway, not loud, not with fists, but with quiet fire. I didn't kill them with hate. I killed them with silence, with calm, with planning, with the same patience they once used to break me. And when they fell, one by one, I didn't dance or cheer. I just breathed for the first time, deep and free. My mama passed a few years later, still thinking I was her fragile little girl who'd lost too much. She never knew the weight I carried. I never let her. And maybe that was mercy. Now, I sit and watch my grandbabies run in the backyard. I smile when they laugh. I hold them close and protect them like no one ever protected me. And when I tell them stories like this one, I leave out the poison. I leave out the screams. I give them the happy endings I never got. But tonight, you, listening to this story, you get the truth. Because maybe you need it. Maybe you're in a house like mine. Maybe you've got bruises no one sees. Maybe you're waiting for someone to come save you. So let me say this plain. You don't have to wait. You can survive. You can outlive the pain. You can rise so high that the people who tried to break you can't even reach your shadow. Because I did. And I'm still here. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more powerful tales like this one. And please leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what you think about this story. There's someone out there who needs to read your words. Let's keep the fire burning.